Okay, thank you. So I forgot to record the prayer, and my introduction is is basically that we are presently in a crisis in this message, and we have an opportunity that God has given us to study His Word together, but also individually to seek Him. And the study today is going to look back at some of our message and trying to understand what God was teaching us in the past. So the study today is on the prediction before midnight. That's the topic. Now, I did a Vesper study last night where I addressed Ezekiel and Snow and looked at the similarities and differences between these two men and the message that they gave. It wasn't really a complete study. A lot of that I presented last night was ideas that I had come across as I was studying for this presentation. So I'm going to ask some questions and try to, I want people to answer. Obviously, everybody can't answer at once. It's not as easy as when you're physically there as a group of people. But how many people understood what the prediction before midnight was, or have no understanding of it? So you're going to have to take a little bit of time. Is there anybody here who didn't understand what the prediction before midnight was about? Anybody who's never heard of the term PBM or prediction before midnight? What's that?
Please explain.
Okay, yeah. So you didn't know about the prediction before midnight. Anyone else who has heard of it but didn't understand what the prediction before midnight was about? You've heard the term, but didn't know what it was.
I could use more light on that because I don't retain very well, a lot better than before, but I mean, I'm just flooded with information. So if you could walk us all through it, because I'm sure I'm not the only dummy.
Yeah, and I'm going to. Now, is there anybody here who feels that they understood what the prediction before midnight was? That they could explain what we understood in 2017 about the prediction before midnight? Anyone that thinks they understood it?
You know what, Theodore, honestly, because that was before the split and everything, and it was being taught then. Probably best that we go through it now. I don't know if I trust what was taught back then, some of the stuff.
Yeah. So, and this is the point, is that there was this idea of the prediction before midnight. Now, this is a teaching that came out of Africa, and it was mostly promoted by Tabo, and he actually did present it at Collins Bible Studies, and he sent me his studies on it. And one of the things that he presented was one of the symbols of the prediction before midnight was 3 days. And he used Ezra chapter 8, where it talks about the river Ahava, and they tarried there for 3 days. Though in the book of Ezra, there's actually 3 periods of 3 days that are mentioned in Ezra 7 to 10. He also used the 3 days of the butler and baker. And there were some other ones, which I can't recall at the moment. But this idea of the prediction before midnight even goes back further, before we had the term prediction before midnight. And I was trying to go back and find out when it first came of this idea that we are going to make a prediction about Islam. Does anyone know when we first talked about this prediction that was going to be made about Islam? Anybody know that history?
Wasn't it back in 2014?
Yes, in December of 2014. And this came when Jeff was, he went to Wales, and he also went to Austria. Does anybody remember that, what I'm talking about? If you remember it, just tell me yes. Okay,
Yes.
so Bonnie does and
Yes.
Dwight does.
He was
Right.
in Wales. He was listening to, was it Deontay or was it, who's the other guy? His wife, him and his wife.
No, it wasn't
Talking
Chalatu.
about
That
the book
was
of
later.
Daniel.
No, so this in 2014,
Oh, that was
December of
later, okay.
2014. And I don't remember exactly how it unfolded, but I do know in 2015, because in 2014, Mark Bruce came to Alberta, the Alberta camp meeting. I don't know if people remember that. And I ended up going to Arkansas, and some other people did as well, for the camp meeting in the fall. And it was after that, a couple of months after that, that this idea came that we were going to make this prediction about Islam. And when Jeff came to Alberta again in 2015, he was saying, we were talking about this. We were talking about this prediction about Islam. So we didn't have the term the prediction before midnight yet. We just had this idea that we were going to make a prediction about Islam. Now, one is we didn't actually even have the term midnight. We had just discovered the midnight cry in 2014. And the idea of midnight developed at the end of 2015 into 2016. So what this prediction about Islam developed into this idea of this prediction before midnight. Now, one of the problems that we are having, I watched the Sabbath school from Arkansas this morning, and we seem still to not have been able to sort through the lines. That is, somebody asked us if the Sunday law was, or where the Sunday law was in our line. I can't remember how the question was worded. But what they were mistake. What's that? What do I? What was the question?
What they had asked is if I was applying July 18 as the cross.
Right, as the cross, that was it. And they said that the Sunday law, they were referring to the Sunday law. Now, the Sunday law is a waymark is the Sunday law a waymark in our line? That's the first question.
It will be, yes.
Okay, well, when I say our line, in the line of the priests, is the Sunday law a waymark? No. Because it's a waymark in the line of the Levites. But the Sunday law is a singular event. And it was typified by October 22nd, 1844. And so it can be typified in our line. But the Sunday law itself occurs after the line of the priests. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to try to understand this, this illustration. Now, the first thing I want to do is lay out these two lines. Now, I had done a study earlier, a couple of weeks ago, on this, on the Friday night studies. And I gave an illustration that 1798 was the time of the end, of course, but it was also the arrival of the first angel's message. And we had these different waymarks that we mark in Millerite history, 1833, August 11th, 1840, April 19th, 1844. These are all 1844 up here. So the first day of the first month. And then, of course, we have July 21st, which is the 5th day of the 4th month. And this is midnight. And then we have August 11th or August 15th, which is the first day of the 5th month. And this is the midnight cry. And then we have October 22nd, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. And this is a symbol of the Sunday law. And this is a symbol of 9/11. So I've sort of laid a little bit of our line over here. Now, one of the things that Ellen White says is she says that the parable of the 10 virgins has been fulfilled and will be fulfilled to the very letter. And when we look at the parable of the 10 virgins, I actually have a statement which I want to read here. So I'll bring this up. Now this is from a paper I'm writing, so I have a bunch of other things in here. So there's a few statements here. Quite a few statements. I'm not going to read them all, but I think I'll go here. So this is in Review and Herald, August 15th, 1890. And I'm going to have to blow this up because this is way too tiny. So there we go. I'm often referred to the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 of whom were wise and 5 foolish. This parable has been and will be fulfilled to the very letter, for it has special application to this time. And one of the things she says about this is, she says, in the parable of the 10 virgins, in the parable, the 10 virgins had lamps, but only 5 of them had the saving oil with which to keep their lamps burning. This represents the condition of the church. So one of the things we see in the parable of the 10 virgins is it's not about the world, it's about the church. Now, there is this other statement from For Spirit of Prophecy. She says, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. The widespread movement under the proclamation of the first message answered to the going forth of the virgins, while the passing of time of expectation, the disappointment and the delay were represented by the tarrying of the bridegroom. After the definite time in the spring of 1844 had passed, the true believers were still united in the belief that the end of all things was at hand. So if we're going to look at this, and I can't have what drawn here, what I'm going to draw out. So I'll just go back to that. She says that this time here is the going forth of the virgins. So what would we call this period of time here?
Tarrying time,
Well, this is the going forth of the virgins.
right?
The tarrying time begins here.
Okay.
So this is the tarrying. I'm going to go here. This is the tarrying time. But normally, what would we call this period of time in Millerite history? It's the proclamation of what?
First angel's message.
Because this is the first angel's message. And after April 19th, what do we have then? The proclamation of?
Second angel's message.
Right. So then we have the second angel's message. And this whole thing is the parable of the 10 virgins, right? This whole
Correct.
thing. And what group is being tested under the first angel?
Is it Protestantism?
Right. So you got Protestants. And what group is being tested under the second angel?
Millerites.
Yeah, Millerites. Exactly. And we know that this is the arrival of the second angel. This is the formalization. This is the empowerment. And then the third angel arrives here. And we know that the proclamation of the third angel continues all the way into our time. So if I put the third angel over here, I'm just gonna draw this line this way. And I put, October 22nd, 1844 here. This is the arrival of the third angel. Now, we had some confusion in our line. So one of the things that I addressed there before is the fact that when we put this repeat of Millerite history into our lines, our history looked nothing like Millerite history. That is, we had 3 different groups, well, actually more than 3, but 3 different main lines that we talked about, the priests, Levites, and the Nethinims. And the thing that we don't see in Millerite history is anything that approximates what we were illustrating in our line. Now, we talk about a fractal, and this was an understanding that was given in 2014 by Michael. And the idea of a fractal was that in each of the steps, in the first angel's message, there is actually 3 different waymarks. And in the second angel's message, there's 3 different waymarks. And in the third angel's message, there's 3 different waymarks. So it was just that if you zoom in, you'll see the same detail in each of those messages that you see in the 3 angels' messages itself. Somehow, and I'm still trying to understand how it happened, but somehow this changed into this idea that we could create these lines of priests, Levites, and Nethinims, and that we could stagger and overlap them, which is not what happens with a fractal. That is, the way that the lines were being drawn was not a fractal pattern. And as far as I'm concerned, it was confusion. The lines, the way that they were being presented and represented was very, very confusing, but that's because it was confusion itself. Now we know that the third angel is here, and it's going to continue all the way to the end of time. But we look at 1989 as the time of the end. It parallels this. And we also have these other events. We got 1996, formalization of the message. And then 9/11 lines up with August 11, 1840. And why does 9/11 line up with August 11th, 1840?
Islam.
What's that? You said
Islam.
Islam? Yeah. So we know that this was about Islam. And so Islam comes into this history, and so we saw this parallel there. But we also say that 9/11, as you see above, lines up with April 19th. So I'm just going to put 9/11 here, because that's April 19th up there. So 9/11 serves 2 purposes that, if we compare it to Millerite history, it serves these 2 purposes. And so we know this is 1 waymark. This is not 2 waymarks in our line. It's just that when we line it up with Millerite history, in order to line it up, we would have to draw it twice. Correct? People understand what I'm doing there?
Yes.
Okay. And then we would have events that we would line up with Midnight Cry, and the Sunday Law, as you see here. And so we would have on our line something called Midnight, something called the Midnight Cry, and something called the Sunday Law. And these are waymarks. Okay, well, first here, who is being tested from 1989 to 9/11? What group?
Corporate church.
Okay, so this is the SDA church is being tested. Now, if this is the repeat of the parable of the 10 virgins to the very letter, this is the history of what? If we compare it to Millerite history. It's all it's the first angel's message, right? And it's also the going forth of the virgins. Now, one of the things that we have about 9/11 is that in 9/11, we have the arrival of the second angel. So I'm going to put the second angel arrives here. Now, I'm not going to put it here, even though it does, because this is the same event. But the second angel arrives. And what is the second angel arriving? Why do we have the second angel arrive at 9/11?
Because the angel of Revelation 18 arrived at 9/11, and that's a repeat of the second angel.
Right. Actually, Ellen White says it is the second angel. Now, we call it the fourth angel, but it's really still the second angel. The second angel, so she says that the proclamation of the third angel's message, I have the quote here. Okay, there's a number of different quotes. I don't see the one. I know I have it here. But anyway, she says we are I need to find the right quote. I should have had them in order. But anyway, she's here. I have a bunch of quotes about this. And she says that we are now under the proclamation of the third angel's message. And I probably, it's just probably missing it when I'm skimming through this.
I could give you one quote very
Okay.
shortly.
Yeah.
As foretold in the 18th of Revelation, the third angel's message is to be proclaimed with great power by those who would give the final warning against the beast and his image. But then I drop down to the next paragraph. This is the message given by God to be sounded forth in the loud cry of the third angel. And
Right.
she gives the reference to Revelation 18, 1-6.
Right. So we know that the third angel's message is going to be joined by the second angel. And maybe I didn't even put this in this paper yet.
You passed
here
it.
it
I
is.
think it was for us, please.
It's for Spirit of Prophecy. The widespread movement under the proclamation of the first message answered to the going forth of the virgins. Now, that's not the quote that I want. I think it's actually here. Oh, this is it. It's manuscript 32, 1896. So this is the one that we know. The proclamation of the first, second, and third angels' messages has been located by the word of inspiration. And then she says the first and second messages were given in 1843 and 1844. And we are now under the proclamation of the third, but all three messages are still to be proclaimed. By pen and voice, we are to sound the proclamation, showing their order and the application of the prophecies that bring us to the third angel's messages, or third angel's message. There cannot be a third without the first and the second. So that's the one I wanted, that statement there. So we know the second angel arrived here at 9/11, and it's joining the third angel, right, to empower it, and it's going to swell to a loud cry. Now, we also know that we have all this other history over here. We're going to have the loud cry, we're going to have the close of probation, the time of Jacob's trouble, the second coming. The question I have, in the context of the repeat of Millerite history, is the third angel's message part of Millerite history? The proclamation of the third angel's message, does it occur in the parable of the 10 virgins in Millerite history? By looking at how the line is drawn here above.
No.
No, so it doesn't. It's the proclamation of the first and second angel's message that Ellen White is paralleling with the parable of the 10 virgins. And she says it's going to be fulfilled, repeated in our history. And we can see that this is the proclamation of the first angel's message. And then we're going to have the proclamation of the second angel's message. Now, this is the truth that Jeff had been teaching for a long time, 9/11 to the Sunday law. And as time went on, we filled in these details of midnight and the midnight cry. So when we look at our history and we look at the Sunday law, which group is being tested here from 9/11 to the Sunday law?
Us.
We are.
Okay, be more specific in comparing Protestants and Millerites and the SDA Church with what other group? The Millerites are Protestants. So this group is going to be Seventh-day Adventists. So which group is being tested here?
Present truth.
Okay, I would say it's the Levites. That this is the line of the Levites here. Now, if we go back here and we look at the first and the second angel's message, there was a message under the first angel's message in our history. We needed to have a first because the second angel arrived, and you can't have a third without the first and the second. So in order for the third angel's message to be empowered, because it was rejected in 1888, which is the time in which it's formalized, the message was formalized, but it wasn't empowered in our history. It could have been if the church had accepted it, but it didn't. So we fell away from that message. We have this progressive destruction of 4 that goes on. And then we get into this history into 1989. And God says that we're under the proclamation of the third message. But in order for that third message to be empowered, it needs a first and a second. And the first and second angels had also been rejected, which is why the third was rejected. So in our history, it was necessary that the first angel's message had to be proclaimed. And then it was also necessary that the second angel's message would be proclaimed. And the group of people being tested under the second angel's message is the Levites. And who are the Levites? Compare them to the Millerites. Who are the Levites if you compare them to the Millerites?
Us?
Okay, it's not, well,
It's the
we're
leader,
priests. We're
leaders of the
priests.
church. Leaders of the church.
Okay, they wouldn't be leaders of the church because the leaders of the church didn't do what? What did the leaders of the church not do? What did the Protestants fail to do?
Accept the first angel's message.
Right. Did the Seventh-day Adventist Church accept the first angel's message in this history from 1989 to 9/11?
No,
No, they rejected the first angel's message. So then who are the Levites? Who are the Millerites? In that context,
the Millerites are those that were called out from the Protestant churches.
yeah, but in the context here, these rejected the first angel's message. Who are the Levites? Who are the Millerites? What do they do? In contrast to these groups,
Are you saying wise virgins?
they accepted the first angel's message.
Right, understood.
That's the point that I'm trying to make, is that here we have the first angel's message. Protestants are being tested. It's the going forth of the virgins. It's the parable of the 10 virgins. But the Protestants reject the first angel's message and they don't receive the second. And the Millerites do receive the second angel's message. The SDA Church was confronted with the first angel's message from 1989 to 9/11. And they reject the first angel's message. So the Levites are the ones who are Seventh-day Adventists, but accept the second angel's message. Now, 9/11 is the arrival of the second angel's message. So we know that. But when we look at midnight and the midnight cry and the Sunday law, this is a repeat of Millerite history. But if we look at the loud cry, which I didn't draw in here, but the loud cry, the close of probation, is that part of this history? Is the third angel's message a part of this history?
No,
No. So when we get to this history, we're under the proclamation of the third, but it's necessary that the history of the Millerites has to be repeated. That is, the parable of the 10 virgins has to be fulfilled in our history. And so we know that that's going to be fulfilled. Now, when we look at this, we could argue that this is the church, and after October 22nd, 1844 is the world, right? That the message was supposed to go forth to the world, but the church failed. And so we have this repeat of the history, which we're in the midst of. We're not even to midnight yet. We're still between 9/11 and midnight, and we'll see that. We had this first angel's message, and now there's going to be the second angel's message. It arrived at 9/11, but it hasn't yet been formalized or empowered yet in our history. And this is because we were confusing the lines. One of the things that we were teaching is that the line of the priests and the line of the Levites go in a staggered pattern where you'd have these waymarks and you would line up these waymarks on these different groups. But nowhere do we see that in Millerite history. We don't see anything like that. We don't see any group representing the priests, Levites, and Nethinims in some kind of staggered pattern. And so in studying this out, we experienced something. And what we experienced, I'm going to erase this part. What we experienced in our movement occurred in Millerite history. What occurred between August 11th, 1844 and April 19th that started a period of time that ended 3 days before July 21st? What is this that we experienced?
Samuel Snow's letters.
Okay, so we have Samuel Snow's letters. And Samuel Snow's letters are something that I'm going to draw here, and I'm going to call the prediction before midnight, the PBM. And I'm going to give you some history on this, of what the PBM was. So this prediction before midnight is not, it's not the line of the priests in the way that we understood it, because we had the line of the priests in a staggered way with the Levites. So just like the Millerites have this midnight and midnight cry, and the Levites had a midnight and midnight cry, we mark this as Raphia and Peniam. So I'm going to expand on that. So where there was this understanding that came regarding this prediction of Islam, and it was connected with what prophet in the Old Testament did we connect this prediction about Islam? Something about 3 strikes. Who was this prophet? Balaam, right? And so we had looked at 9/11 as the first strike, and there was going to be 2 more strikes, correct?
Yes.
Is that how we understood Balaam?
Yes, that's how I understood it.
Yeah. And so, and that's correct. So God was teaching us a lot of things, but we were misplacing these things because we didn't understand Millerite history completely. Now, Raphi and Peniam, we came to understand that Raphi and Peniam were events in the book of Daniel that were connected with this prediction that we had regarding Islam. But we also recognized that there was this battle between the king of the north and the king of the south that was part of the Islam was part of the catalyst in that battle. So, and I'm not going to go because there's a lot of information there, but I just want to deal with this basic idea that Raphi and Peniam are midnight and the midnight cry, and those are events in the line of the Levites. But we also believed that they were events that were connected with our line, at least in the way that we were understanding where we were in our line. Now, if you look at Samuel Snow's letters, what's the date of his last letter?
July 18th.
So it's July 18th. Now we know he had his first letter written on February 16th. And I'm not going to go into a whole study of Samuel Snow's letters, but what was the center letter from his writing of his first letter to the writing of the last letter? What was it? What's the date? Anybody know? It was May 2nd. Now, Tabo in 2017 was telling us that May 2nd was the prediction before midnight. Now, what he was saying is that Samuel Snow had this light regarding what was going to happen in the future, and that he was making a prediction before midnight. Now, when Tabo figured this out, it was in the spring of 2017. That was actually people from Africa. Tabo was promoting it here. I don't think he was the origin of the idea. It was brethren in Africa who had come up with this idea of the PBM. And he took this second letter of Samuel Snow's and said it was the prediction before midnight. Now, as I studied this history in 2017, I came to recognize that there was 4 primary letters that occurred prior to midnight that all addressed the 10th day of the 7th month over here. And that Samuel Snow was saying, Jesus is not going to come back here. And he started this on January 1st, in 1844, he had resolved that he was going to proclaim his belief that Jesus wasn't coming back in the spring, but was coming back in the fall. And so these letters are a development of that understanding. But as I came to study this, I came to recognize that July 18th, in Tabot's own symbolism, was 3 days before midnight, and thus was the symbol of the prediction before midnight. Now, this prediction, the way that it was understood in 2017, had no time setting attached to it. And we had just come to understand Raphia and Panium. So we were trying to understand what this Raphia and Panium prediction is about and how it's related to this prediction before midnight. But Parminder shut down the discussion on the prediction before midnight, and he did it in a very secretive way. One is he would just say he didn't understand it, and he would present other ideas in opposition to it without directly attacking it. And so this was a very carefully planned approach to undermine what was being taught and what was being studied. And he introduced other ideas that then became the main topics of conversation. So instead of just addressing it directly and trying to say it's wrong or it's right or study it, he avoided the issue by presenting new ideas and basically ignoring the prediction before midnight. Now, when we found this center of this chiasm, it was that we recognized that this date, February 16th, is the second month, the 16th day, and that it's 2 months and 16 days to May 2nd, and then 2 months and 16 days to July 18th. So I could put here 2 months and 16 days, and that's how I counted and came up with this chiasm. But also, it's 77 days, which is an extremely powerful symbol. That in Samuel Snow's letters, there is a chiasm that's made up of 777 or 77 and 77. Now, in our history, we also have chiasms. And we have tried to connect these chiasms to these events, Raphia and Panium. So what did we think November 9th was going to be? November 9th, 2019. When we first came up with November 9th, 2019, what event was it going to be?
Well, we-
Raphia.
Raphia.
Okay, so the idea was that it was Raphia. Was it Raphia?
No.
No. None of the events of Raphia, of anything that we expected about Raphia, occurred on November 9th, 2019. And what was July 18th going to be prior to November 9th? We thought November 9th was going to be Raphia, so that was going to be coming. And what was July 18th going to be prior to November 9th?
Panium.
Panium, right? So we believe that this was going to be Raphia and Panium. And we believe that based upon all the light that we had had. But since this wasn't Raphia, why did we not abandon our idea of July 18th as being Panium, or did we? Why did we not do that? Why didn't we just say, well, since November 9th didn't work out the way we expected, we shouldn't expect July 18th to work out the way we expect? Why didn't we do that? You can talk from a personal point of view, or you can talk from what you think the movement thought. But why do you think that we didn't just abandon July 18th once November 9th passed?
Well, there was discussion that the Raphia was internal but not external, although
Yeah.
I don't really see that. But
Yeah. Well, my argument is that we're doing exactly the same things as the Millerites did in their history. We did a study that showed the Millerites believed August 11th, 1840 was going to be the beginning of the seventh trumpet, and it was going to be the beginning of the third woe, and it was going to be the close of probation. The probation was going to close in 1840 because they believed, like we do as Seventh-day Adventists, before Jesus comes back, you need the 7 last plagues. You need the time of Jacob's trouble. There's a bunch of events that have to occur before Christ returns. But when they get to the summer of 1844, are they expecting the 7 plagues to begin, or the 3rd woe to begin, or the 7th trumpet to begin to sound? They're expecting Jesus to come back, but all the events that they believe that have to occur before Jesus comes back, are they expecting them now?
No.
No. Why not? Why wouldn't they say, look, Jesus can't come back on October 22nd because we have all these events that have to occur before Jesus comes back. I mean, they even believe that the close of probation actually had to occur before the second coming. And many put that at the first day of the 7th month, so about 10 days before. Some of them have, like, October 13th would have been the close of probation. That's the way that many of them looked at it. So why did they do that? How could you abandon what you already believe in this midnight cry history? Why would they do that? You know, it seems kind of foolish, you know, when we look at it now. We could say, well, you believed all these things, and yet since they didn't happen, you just ignore them. But we did the same thing. We did the same thing when November 9th passed, is things that we expected, we had been teaching were going to happen, hadn't happened, and yet we still persisted in recognizing these dates like July 18th as that we were on track. Now, in Samuel Snow's letters, Samuel Snow, his letters symbolize what's going to happen in this history. And they're also connected with April 19th. So we know that Samuel Snow's second letter is Passover, right? And that he had his first letter published twice. The first time it's published on the date for the dedication of the temple, and the second time it's published on the Jewish Passover, which was April 3rd. And then his second letter is also published, but on the true Passover. And when we look at Samuel Snow's letters, his third letter is Pentecost, and then his fourth letter, which is entitled the confirming the covenant, it's published on July 18th. Now, when we look at this history here, and I've done this lots because this to me is absolutely amazing, but if we add these dates together, from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month, we know is 187 days. And if we add these dates together as just numbers, they also equal 187. And 187 is the 10th day of the 7th month is the 187th day of the year on the biblical calendar. And Samuel Snow's letters, his last letter is a symbol of 187, the 18th day of the 7th month. And his letters symbolize this history. So if we were going to look at our history, what would we mark as the end of the PBM? What was the prediction before midnight? What was the message in our history about?
July 18th.
Okay, July 18th, right? So that is July 18th, 2020. And we could actually go through Samuel Snow's letters and we can look at the dates of his letters, or the letters themselves, and the symbolism there, and show that 9/11, as far as this movement is concerned, parallels April 19th, but that this movement begins before that parallel that goes to April 19th. Does that make sense to people? Because this is something that some people have had a problem with, because I have two 9/11s here. What is this 9/11 in relationship to our movement? what is this? So in relationship to our movement, what is this 9/11 paralleling?
Islam.
So this is Islam, right? And this movement is making a prediction about what? Islam, right? Now, this second angel's message, what happens in this history, in Millerite history on April 19th? Why is it the second angel's message? Why does the second angel arrive here? We've already kind of addressed it. Because the first angel's message was rejected. So if the first angel's message is rejected, then the second angel arrives. Now, Samuel Snow's letters contain more detail about this and give us an understanding of our history. So our history has been the history of the prediction before midnight. We just didn't recognize that that's what our history was. Now, one of the problems that we had when I was addressing Samuel Snow's letters, and me and Jeff were discussing this back in 2018, because he was presenting Samuel Snow's letters in all the meetings he was doing. He had finally understood Samuel Snow's letters and was presenting them. But the issue that I had is that Samuel Snow began before the symbol for 9/11 with this prediction before midnight. And I said, well, I don't know how we can line that up in our history, because we would then have to start before 9/11. But the prediction before midnight doesn't. But Jeff said, well, it does. But it does by splitting 9/11 into two different groups. We can see that this is 9/11 for the Levites. That is, the symbol for 9/11, the arrival of the second angel, addresses the Levites. But for our movement, in this prediction before midnight, the second angel, or the division that occurs within our movement, occurs after the prediction before midnight. That is, when we begin to understand this prediction before midnight, when Samuel Snow begins to write his letters, a division begins in this movement here, and a division begins here. Now, where would you line up the beginning of the prediction before midnight with Samuel Snow's letters? What year would you mark as the beginning of the PBM? And in this case, it's after 9/11, right? So it's after this symbol of 9/11, but internally, 9/11 occurs within the prediction before midnight. So it's a date after 9/11. Which date would you mark? Which year would you mark as the beginning of the PBM? Anybody have any ideas? Well, I do it this way. Whether this is right or not, I don't know. But it's October 22nd, 2014. And this is the midst of the week of the 2004 camp meeting. Now, this is the first camp meeting in Arkansas that I was at. And I was actually presenting not time setting, but chronology at this meeting. For the first time, this movement was being addressed with this chronology. And I was addressing things like the 187 days from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the seventh month. I was dealing with the 391 and a half years of the kings of Judah. A whole bunch of things were introduced into this movement that actually became essential in making this prediction of July 18th, 2020. Now, as you can see, we still have these two 9/11s, but internally, the division that occurs in this movement starts at the beginning here. If you go to Samuel Snow's letters, what is the division that occurs in this movement? When does the division begin? Does it actually begin on April 19th?
No.
Is the first angel's message rejected on April 19th? And if it is, why? And if not, why not? I know somebody said something, but I couldn't hear them.
Yes, they rejected the first angel's message.
On April 19th?
Yes.
Okay, so my argument would be no, they rejected it before. Because what date was Miller predicting for the end of his prophetic periods?
April 1843.
He was predicting March 21st, 1844. So anybody who believed in Miller's prediction, they actually would have experienced their disappointment on March 21st, 1844. Actually, they were experiencing disappointments all the way through. This date of April 19th wasn't accepted by everyone. That is, many people did not accept that April 19th was the first day of the first month. In order to receive that April 19th is the first day of the first month, you actually have to receive the first angel's message. You don't come to April 19th without accepting October 22nd as being the 10th day of the seventh month. You understand what I'm saying? Because if you believe that March 21st is the first day of the first month, then the 10th day of the seventh month is September 23rd. So even in Samuel Snow's letters, we have these two Passovers. The one that's April 3rd, that's based upon March 21st being the first day of the first month. And then we have the second Passover, May 2nd, that's based upon April 19th being the first day of the first month. So those, the blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1335 days, he's going to receive the second angel's message. But many people are falling away in this history prior to April 19th. The ones who end up accepting April 19th also accept the second angel's message. So we can see in this history, we have people who are rejecting this message. Now, somebody might even say it's in the spring of 2014. I mark October 22nd. But we know that it's here that we have the separation that first begins in our message. It's in 2014, whether somebody wants to, define it as October 22nd. Maybe we could even say October 22nd aligns with, the publication February 22nd or something in Millerite history. But the point is, at the beginning of this, a separation begins. Now, when we get to where would this event occur in the PBM? When does the second angel's arrive, the second angel's message arrive within this movement in regard to the division between the true and the false priests? What date would you choose if you were going to say, in this PBM, in this movement, we have a separation that occurs? What date would you give?
September 11th.
I can't hear you.
September 11th, 2019.
November 9th. I don't know if that's what you said. November 9th, 2019. Now, after, when we look at Samuel Snow's letter, there's a bunch of symbolism, and I'm not hard and fast on these dates here and how I'm lining this up. What I can say is that this prediction before midnight causes a division within this movement. And you're going to have true priests and false priests. But this is typical because Samuel Snow's letters are typical of what's happening on the bigger line. So when we say that the line of, what's that? What's that? Somebody said something, I didn't hear them.
I was just wondering, like for November 9th, if it's also September
I
11th.
can't hear you still. You keep cutting in and out.
Okay. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah. So when you get right close and you talk loud, I can hear you, but otherwise it drops out. So, so this is a typical line, but it's not the big line. Samuel Snow's letters are a symbol or prefigure what happened in this movement, which was the prediction before midnight. But I was teaching that the line of the priests is a typical line. But like all of you, I was trying to line the priests up in this staggered fashion with the line of the Levites. But if we look at this symbol, of what happens here in this history, and we understand that it's typical, we can see that Samuel Snow's letters are typifying a history that's being unfolded. And we also looked at that Snow is Ezekiel. And one of the questions I wanted to ask, so I know not everybody's really prepared, but in Samuel Snow's letters, do we see the cross? Does anybody know where we see the cross in Samuel Snow's letters? It should be just staring you right in the face. Because what is May 2nd? What is his May 2nd letter about? It's about the midst of the week, right? His May 2nd letter is going to be about the cross, the 3.5 years and the 3.5 years. And we'll see that this actually occurs in our history as well, that we also have a cross in our history. Now, the other thing is, in Ezekiel, is there a cross in Ezekiel? So this is maybe, not everybody's going to understand this question. Because it's actually involved. Yeah, there is a cross in it. Now, I'm not going to explain it all, but the only thing that I can say is one of the things that Ezekiel points to is the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And what part of the book of Daniel addresses the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD in connection with the cross?
Daniel.
So Daniel what? I just heard a thing. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. And if you read those chapters, especially those verses, especially the last 2 verses of Daniel 9, it talks about the midst of the week and the destruction of Jerusalem. It talks about Messiah being cut off and the destruction of Jerusalem. And Ezekiel is addressing the destruction of Jerusalem, both in 586 BC and in 70 AD. And all of the symbolism that we have here in Samuel Snow's letters and all the symbolism that we have in Millerite history in these dates is represented in the book of Ezekiel. So the book of Ezekiel, or Ezekiel himself, typifies Samuel Snow. But now, does Samuel Snow end with his letters? Is July 18th the end of Samuel Snow?
No.
No. This is a typical line. His letters are a typical line, typifying of the work that's going to be accomplished in the giving of the second angel's message. Samuel Snow is going to stand here at midnight in Boston and on August 15th in Exeter. This is this prediction before midnight. This is our line, however you want to understand it or structure it or date it. The one thing that we can be clear is that July 18th, 2020, in the typical line of the priests, lines up with July 18th, 1844. And do the priests end on July 18th, 2020? This is a tricky question because some people might have a different answer. July 18th, 2020 marks the end of something, but is it the end of the priests?
No.
No. Why? Because what has to happen?
They have to give a message.
Yeah, we still have to give a message at Raphia and Panium. What we experience now is so relevant to understanding what's going to happen in the future. Now, is this connected with the first disappointment, Samuel Snow's letters?
Yeah.
How is it connected with the first disappointment? How would you explain it? If you had to explain it to somebody in this message and you say, Samuel Snow's letters are connected with the first disappointment.
Well, Samuel Snow's first letter in May was connected with the cross, and we have to give an explanation that this connection with the cross is the equivalent of our first disappointment, very much like what the disciples would have had.
Right. And we have these disappointments in our line, right? And
Right.
these are typifying what's going to happen in our line, because this is a development of truth that occurred in this movement that helps, that prepares and demonstrates it prepares one group of people to give a message. So it develops and demonstrates two classes of worshipers. One group of people in this movement fall away, and they fall away progressively, just like they do in this history. There's a progressive falling away. You don't just have one date and everybody, it doesn't go 500,000 Millerites and then the next day 50,000, even though we sort of characterize it that way. It happens gradually as these disappointments pile up. And so we saw this in our movement, the apostasy that occurred within this movement, people leaving this movement, occurred progressively. Now, we would mark November 9th as the particular date where, the false priests left us, and then we're the true priests. But if we look at Millerite history and we look at Samuel Snow's letters, there's still more going on. It doesn't end with his May 2nd letter. There's still the Pentecost letter, which symbolizes the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And there's also July 18th. And one of the things that we recognized between November 9th and July 18th was an outpouring of the Holy Spirit. But this was, again, typical. It's typical of what's going to happen with the Levites in our line. All of the things that happen to us are necessary as an illustration for us to give a powerful message at Raphia and Penium, because these events will occur. But when they occur, the only group of people that have an explanation is the people who are represented by this group of people here. Samuel Snow has the explanation. This group of people has the explanation. So this movement is Samuel Snow, but we have two phases of Snow: the Snow of the letters, and then the public Snow once he has to stand here and here. And so we have the same thing with this movement. This movement, like Snow is not a major preacher. He's a layman. And Snow is, and that's one of the things I showed yesterday, is that we have to take some of the symbols from Ezekiel, such as the 30 years, which we don't have illustrated here, and some of the other symbols from Samuel Snow, and we combine them into our history. So this history here is about this preparation of the priests to give a message to the Levites. And so Samuel Snow represents the priests, but his letters represent what we had just have experienced, this prediction before midnight. So we thought we were predicting actual events, not knowing that our line was typical. That is, we didn't understand our line. Snow didn't understand his letters, what the significance of them was. He didn't know that the dates that they were written or published were extremely significant. And we didn't understand what we were doing. That is, God was giving us light. He wasn't giving us darkness, but he gave it to us in a certain way for a specific reason. And that's so that the parable of the 10 virgins would be fulfilled to the very letter in our history. And this is what we are experiencing. Now we know that the second angel's message has to do its work, and that the third angel's message will be empowered at the Sunday law. And then, because Ellen White says the second angel joins it, it swells, it empowers the message, and it will swell into a loud cry. So the second angel's message has to do a work here so that it can power the third angel's message, and then it will swell into a loud cry to give the warning message to the world. And when we recognize that the repeat of Millerite history is this history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that the third angel's message's empowerment is to give a message to the world, then we can see this illustration of the church and the world, that that Ellen White has talked about. Any questions on this? I don't want to go any further as far as adding more detail. But if somebody doesn't understand what's here or has some observations, something I don't notice, I'd be happy to hear what that is. Is it clear or is it not clear? I have no idea if I've lost everyone or not.
Hey, Theodore, I have a question.
Okay.
Does that mean that you'd class Miller himself as a Levite?
Well, yes. I mean, Miller is a Levite in this history. If that's what you're asking. I mean, you know, Jeff, for instance, in our history, Jeff had a certain message. He parallels Miller in this history. Miller is the messenger here, right? But once they get to this history, is Miller the messenger in this history?
Yeah, basically that's what I'm asking, because it doesn't seem like he is. It's in some ways, Snow is the messenger here.
Right, right. Now, now Snow is not a person in our history, but I would argue that Jeff fulfills the parallel to Miller under the first angel's message in this history. In our history, Jeff is parallel to Miller. But once we get into this history here, as we start to move through this history, Jeff becomes a Levite, or as we all are, because we received the first angel's message, which makes us Levites. That's why Miller is a Millerite. He receives the first angel's message. So then he's going to be in this history. But also there is a special group, and this special group, if we're going to say who this group is, we say it's the priests, but I still think that this is the history of FFA, that FFA serves a special role in this prediction before midnight. This is light that specifically comes to FFA and through FFA. And that when we get to the end of, and I'm not saying that July 18th is necessarily the absolute end of FFA, but I am saying that as far as this development of truth is concerned, at July 18th, that was the message, that was the date that we had proclaimed. And now we are trying to sort out, because we're still in this tarrying time, we're trying to sort out what happened. We're trying to understand our experience. And so we will still stand here and here. And whether it's FFA that stands here and here, I don't know. As an organization, that I can't say. But I do know that the message that was developed here will be proclaimed here and here. And FFA had everything to do with that message. That in that context, Samuel Snow is going to be vindicated here, because part of this is about vindication of the message, not so much the person, but the message. And this message here, which appears to be a failure, we can see that it's going to be vindicated as these events unfold in the future. But they're still future. Raphi and Peniam have not occurred. And July 18th, as a symbol, is a symbol of 3 days before midnight. So this has to be the prediction before midnight. This has to be Samuel Snow's letters. However, we date these other dates. Okay, thanks for that question. I hope that makes it clear. Because one thing Jeff said to me is he said, now in this time, and this was back in 2000, I think it was in 2016 when I was a student at the School of the Prophets. It might have been 2018 when I was there as well. But we were talking about Samuel Snow. And he agreed that he's Samuel Snow and that Samuel Snow is this movement. Later on, we tried to identify, even though Jeff had opposed the idea of identifying people, we eventually came to recognize, at least for a short time, that Tess was Samuel Snow. which I thought was a very dangerous teaching and a departure from something that we had established, that this movement was Samuel Snow. So however we want to define this movement, whether we define it as FFA or as something bigger, or those influenced by FFA, I don't know. Any other thoughts or problems or questions? Because, you know, I don't know what time it is, but probably we're done with our time.
I just had another quick question. Does
Yeah.
that mean that the priests are kind of in the same category as the Levites, or paralleling the Levites for the most part, but that certain priests will be part of this prediction before midnight?
Okay, so priests are Levites, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so priests are Levites. So these priests, these people are part of this message. We're Seventh-day Adventists who have accepted the second angel's message, right? We're actually going to give the second angel's message. So obviously we have to have accepted it. But in order for the second angel's message to be given, you have to have a group of people that are going to give it. Samuel Snow was that group of people. In this history, he was a person. In our history, it's not a person, it's a group. And so we are the priests, but we also are Levites. It's just that somebody has to give that message. The Levites themselves have to receive this message. And this message was developed, just like the Millerites had to receive the message of Snow's letters. They had to receive that message. But it's going to be in these future events that will occur. And we were thinking that the line of the priests was staggered with the line of the Levites in such a way that waymarks on our line were waymarks on their line. But if you think about it, Samuel Snow's line, the line of the priests, we tried to go back to 1989 and have this line of the priests, and then the line of the Levites starting at 9/11, and then the line of the Nethinims beginning at Raphia, different things like that. But we don't see that in Millerite history. We see Samuel Snow's letters, which is this, and it's not staggered in that way. It's something that's zoomed in, which is what a fractal is. You zoom in to this waymark here, April 19th, and you start to see that April 19th has these two Passovers associated with it, and it has these letters associated with it. And this is 9/11. And now this is 9/11 as well. So if we zoom in to this 9/11, we will see that this group of people, this movement, is connected with this 9/11 as the arrival of the second angel's message because of the rejection of the first angel's message by the Adventist church. That's why this movement exists in the way that it is here in this history. Now it exists here to give the first angel's message, right, to the SDA church. So the first angel's message is being given, but it's rejected. But now the second angel's message has to be developed, and that's given to the Levites. And that's what Samuel Snow's letters was the second angel's message, the development growing that then could be given to the Millerites. So that's what our PBM was. And I mean, there's a lot more to the PBM, you know, the very details of how this unfolded in the movement I'm not addressing because there's very significant dates. And this is part of this structural chiasm that we have dealing with November 9th and July 18th and December 25th, 2021, which is a symbolic date. It's not a date that we look for an event because we now understand since this line is typical and it addresses symbolically what's going to happen on the bigger line, we can then say that December 25th is going to address a symbol of the Sunday law, just as July 18th also does symbolize October 22nd because it's the 187th day of the year, and this is a symbol of the 187th day of the year. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up is I guess it's because there was so much separation between the priest line and the Levite line. And when you look at it in the sense that Levites are the priests and priests are Levites, that you can put them together in these lines. So when you talk about Levites, you're talking about priests.
Yes. So in the parable of the 10 virgins, because that's what we're studying here, is we can
Yeah.
see that it was fulfilled in Millerite history and it's being fulfilled in our history. And it's to the very letter. But we were misapplying where we were in this line. Because we would have lined 9/11 up, or not, November 9th up with Raphia. And we can see that it doesn't line up with Raphia. It symbolizes it, typically, but these are not external events. Raphia and Peniam are singular events that occur in the line of the Levites. They don't occur in the big line. And that's the thing about the big line. When we look at the loud cry and the close of probation and all the things that happen later, we were trying to make those be a repeat of Millerite history, but they're not. Millerite history ends with the arrival of the third angel's message. And our history, the repeat of the parable of the 10 virgins, ends with the empowerment of the third angel's message. Because it has to go through again the first and the second angel's message. And once the second angel's message repeats and does its work that was done here, then the third angel is empowered. The third angel doesn't arrive in our history at all. It arrived on October 22nd, 1844, according to the Spirit of Prophecy. Even though it was rejected in 1888, where it is formalized as the message of righteousness by faith, we're still under its proclamation. She doesn't say the proclamation of the third angel ended with its rejection in 1888. She says, no, we're still under its proclamation. But she does say that the second angel has to join it. And you can't have a third without the first and the second. So that means the first angel also has to come again in order for the second angel to arrive. So to me, it becomes very clear, at least in my mind, maybe not in everyone's mind, but here I can now see a clear representation of the fulfillment of the 10 virgins in Millerite history as being fulfilled to the very letter in our history. And it explains our disappointment. It explains where we are in this line, in these lines. And it explains so many different things that I haven't even touched upon, that we can now with confidence accept what happened to us and recognize that the events that we were predicting are still going to occur. Raphia and Peniam and the Sunday law will occur as we predicted, but they're not in our line per se. They're not in the line that we were in. These dates that we were predicting don't line up with these dates. They come before as a prediction before midnight. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, I went a little long, but.
Thanks, Theodore.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So we can close with prayer, and we need to continue to pray for this movement, for the people making decisions, and for ourselves. And we have to remember the only person that we have control of is ourselves. I have no control over the decisions of others. I can represent Christ by obedience to him. And as I do so, I can possibly have an effect upon other people's lives and the decisions they make. But I can only control myself. And so we really need to be focusing upon ourselves, what we have failed in personally. And we also have to recognize that this message was given by God and accept it by faith. Because the light that shines along the path is behind us. And if we reject that light, we will stumble off the path and go into darkness. So let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for the fellowship that we can have. We know that it's not ideal being on Zoom. And we wish that we could be there to see each other's faces and to recognize that each of us as a person has struggles with what has happened. Many of us have hurt, and some of us are frightful. We're fearful. We have doubts. We have doubts about ourselves, about others. But we know, Lord, that you can use us if we are faithful. Help us to be diligent students of your word, to be obedient in all things. And we ask for your angels to watch over each person. We pray for those making decisions for this movement. We know, Lord, that it's a huge burden, a huge responsibility, and we just ask that you can comfort them, give them wisdom, and that you can guide. Help us, Lord, to follow you, to serve you, and to be representatives of you upon this earth. And thank you for hearing this prayer. And we pray this and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.